Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Dianna Dini.
Hey, Dianna. I saw a report the other day, and I was talking to my wife about it, and it was like, I opened the discussion with her on, when was the last time you actually read a book? And she's like, there was the series 10 years ago I really liked.
Whoa. Yeah, I've been getting more into reading in the last couple years. I've got a trick on how to read more and longer books. And maybe I need to give you some recommendations.
Well, there's that. I did notice that you had a guest on your podcast, and you would do book reviews, basically. Yes. Is that the trick? Is commit to a fellow reader?
Do you want to do that? We can set that up.
We could.
Yeah, that was interesting because that kind of stemmed with how I learned to read more, which was, I don't know why. You know, once somebody says something and it clicks and you're like, why did I always think that? Mm-hmm. But, I would always think that, I have this one book that I'm reading. I have to finish this book before I start another one, mm-hmm. Which, when you say it out loud, that's really silly. Yeah. But so I started reading maybe 4 or 5 books at a time.
Okay.
So they were different genres. So if I didn't feel like reading the one at the time, then I would pick up a different one and read that one instead.
Okay.
And so I ended up reading 52 books in last year or the year before. But with the people that I talk with on like the podcast interviews, we would read 2 different books at the same time and then pull out similar themes and relate it to engineering work. And they've been a lot of fun. I'm always up to doing another one of those.
Okay. No, and I was familiar with a good number of the books then, and I know I've read them, like especially the ones on, drawing a blank on his name. To design to err as human, or to design as human, or what? How did he?
Yeah, Petrosky's one.
Books, yeah.
And the Wright brothers was another. How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then the Suji Nakamura and the Blue LED. Those are just some of the books that we've done that way.
But I used to read, a broad spectrum of stuff on business management type topics and learning organizations. I remember reading a pile of those things, and a lot of technical books on reliability. It became a passion about 5-6 years ago. I noticed on Amazon, if you sort by price, there's a whole bunch of old books that are out there that are like 10 cents.
Yeah.
$2 for shipping or something like that.
Except now, earlier this week, there was just a thing about, if you have a Kindle book, you can only read it on your Kindle now. So some people are upset about that. But yes, there's some good deals to be found.
And so it was part of it was looking for, so who is at fault for really promoting MTBF? I was kind of on a tear to figure out who was the earliest popular textbook that got us down that path, kind of thing. And it turned out, as far as I can tell, it was a 1957 military standard that caused the problem. But and that was just as part of how do people write about, say, block diagrams. We were talking about that in our last episode. Is how do people, approach these different things? And then I'm off in science fiction world. I mean, I'm on a different tear for a while. I remember, it was probably 30 years ago, I ran into a Heinlein book, he's a science fiction author, and went back to the bookstore. Remember those? And there was a whole shelf of his stuff. And I'm like, oh, wow, cool. I'm going to the library.
That's the best.
Yeah.
When you read one and then you go back and then there's shelves and shelves. You're like, where have I been?
That's right.
Yeah.
And enjoyed a bunch of that stuff. But it's, it relates to what we do because we often write reports. We write up test results. We write up like halt testing. When Mike Silverman it was running this halt lab, he had a template and it was probably 30 pages long. And then you
Wow.
tuck in all the details. And it was like an experimental report. It was, here's the product we were using and the model number, and here's a picture of the serial plate. Here's the types of, here's how we decided what stresses to apply and why,
Yes, I know what you're talking about now, yes.
and then here's the results we saw, and then the failure analysis as far as we could get it at this point. Here's our recommendations. And it was a long report. It was, if you're building that product, it was worth parsing through it and figuring out what ones you got to pay attention to or not, and so on. Yet what I heard in this report was that there was problems with students focusing in college to actually read a book. So like they're in an English lit class and they're assigned a novel, and very, very few without most had difficulty actually reading the book for more than 10 minutes at a time or something like that.
Now, I may have heard of the same study, or there was a YouTube video where a guy may have been referencing the same study. I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's and they were accounting, they weren't assigning the blame. They had some theories and stuff like that, but it's too easy to just be on your phone or a computer or a smart device and ask a question. It's so we've got this instant access to an amazing amount of information where it's easy to just go, I'm going to spend 2 minutes on this and look that up. And then I find a word, I don't know what it is. And I go look that up. And I got 3 things on my schedule today. I'll go do, add GPT, giving me an outline for that. And then, but they were relating it to a reinforcement of short form reading, and Twitter as being a source of news rather than a half-hour broadcast, for example, which isn't reading. It's different.
Yeah.
But then libraries and literary people and stuff are saying, we're just not selling as many books and people just aren't reading as much. And that's where the study came in. It's like, yeah, you're right. It's showing itself in colleges where people are assigned to. When I was in college, we had a history class, and I still have the books. It was 4 feet tall, 8.5 by 11 soft covered books. It was
Yeah. A
just
lot.
a lot of reading. Every night it was 200, 300 pages of reading. And it was a 4.5 credit hour course. We met 4 times a week. It's like,
Yeah, I remember those kind of courses too. And then what the source that I saw, they were relating it to how literature is taught in schools now,
hmm,
that kids are reading short stories and then um making doing an analysis on that short story
mm-hmm.
and not really reading the long form novels so much anymore. And I can't speak to that space.
Yeah. No,
But
I did appreciate when we get assigned a Hemingway book because you knew it was going to be short. Hemingway did not write 600-page tomes.
I know like the booktubers world, they've helped promote some reading, or people are watching them so that they can discover new authors
Mm-hmm.
too. So reading's not dead, but there is less of it. And then you were talking about like the long form reliability reports. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah,
and I do remember I was working at Raychem, and one minute I had this, it was a set of experiments we were running, and it was experimental report, and here's the even the exact summary I think was 3 pages, and he was like, "Why did you bother writing this all down?" Like, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel and do it again. Even the dead ends I wrote about those, saying, well, don't go here. Here's why. Here's the physics of why this just doesn't work. So don't try it again, kind of thing. And he like, why did you write this down? um, you're not going to be here forever. And the next manager may think this would be a good idea, and they're going to waste $100,000 on a dead end that we know is a dead end. And I might not be here either. So I wrote it down. And he was very much on the half page executive summary. If it can't be said to me that way, then I won't deal with it, kind of thing.
Huh.
You know,
Well, I mean, those are necessary to help with communication, but, yeah, I'm with you that you wanna document it somehow. Maybe not so much for yourself or just because you can, but for either understanding how you handled the project or made the decisions you made, because that might come into play if things go
hmm
badly in the field. You could say, "Well, we did all these testing and here's the reports," or
Yeah, the medical device people do that more often. I think it's
yeah,
a bit of proof that they did think it through.
right. So there's that angle, but then even so, I like to take your approach where, if somebody new starts, you're kinda communicating with them, "This is what we did," or "This is what you try, and you don't need to do that." And I have had people, like, years ago, like, I would work for a company and then step away and then come back on a consulting role,
hmm
and somebody had contacted me, and they said, "Hey, you did that report on this process." It was a spot welding process.
hmm
That was really good. We learned a lot from that, like, I really appreciated that report because I think they read it and they took it to the next step then, because
Right,
they weren't starting from 0.
right.
So, I think those kind of reports are necessary when you're in engineering.
Well, it made me think though, it was a product lifecycle document, and it was meant to be a guide for the program manager and the team to figure out, well, here's the types of major things that we need to do at these different phases. Here's when we get marketing geared up, and here's the types of information they need. The original document was written with a whole lot of, and this is why. These are the considerations, kind of thing. It provided it was a hefty document, but it provided context. And so in my time in that organization, somebody decided, well, I'm not reading that whole thing. So they made it a checklist. It was on one page. They had cute names for each of the phases. For whatever reason, companies do that. And but it just boiled it down to bullet points essentially, without any context, without any considerations, without any lessons learned from the past. And it became a checklist item rather with open to interpretation by the current team. And they really bombed a couple of projects after that. When there's a new project manager that was their life cycle and didn't have the context and why we're doing these things at the various times. And I don't know if it was just not a very well skilled program manager, project manager, or they weren't given the the wealth of information that the organization had gathered into the original document. So it was brought back. The big document was brought back and updated. But when
Hmm.
I was working with this team, we had a document on, it was a design for reliability manual, and it outlined, I think, 6 different major things that to do and how to do it and so on and why. We had a derating guideline that included paragraphs of why this is a why you should choose this component over this component in this circumstance, and then links out to evidence of it somewhere else of why it was done that way. When it came down to just being a checklist derating on one piece of paper, which is easy to implement if you know why, new engineers came on and then they'd make all mistakes that we had learned the hard way not to do. And it was just in the effort to make it streamlined and easier is a risk because you're losing information, you're losing history, you're losing the context. And making it easy because people don't read as much or don't have time to read, or if it's not in a text message, it's not worth doing. I think that speaks to a bigger problem. So, but as a reliability or quality professional, it's how do you got to understand the communication modes and techniques within your organization. But I'm with you, is still document it, write it down. It helps just think it through on your own, but it also leaves that piece where, like your welding study is, then they have something solid they can build on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point about context. Because I know a lot of quality people like to use templates.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's groups that like to use the templates, also, like, they ask for them. I used to not like them. If I had a
Mm-hmm.
form or a template,
Yep.
I'm like, "Ugh, what why do I have to use this thing?" But, I'm gaining an understanding and appreciation for them. They have a place, um, and they do act as a checklist. They can help make sure that you're not missing anything. But you're right that they don't have a lot of that context. Now, I've seen a lot of templates where they have, like, the blue text in it.
Mm-hmm.
So your template, everything in it's black, and then there's, blue temporary text, and once you click on it, it just goes away. But it helps provide some of that context,
Oh, okay. I know
but
what you mean. Yeah.
not as much as, like you said, if there was a guide or, there is a danger of removing all the context, so then the template just becomes meaningless.
Yeah. Now, in people that understand it, help develop it, or hash through why we're doing it this way, um, they're fine. It becomes a nice aid for them. It becomes a problem, and I think it's Petrosky, when he was talking about engineering problems. He says, the first generation is very conservative, and they over design, and they put a lot of margin in it, and they want to protect their reputation and all this other stuff. And by the time that technology or that design approach is commonplace, it's the third generation of engineers, and they don't understand where those risks are, where the variables were, where the issues that were most concerning to the original designers. And then I'm thinking of the Design Paradigms book. Um, and then they make the bridge 1 foot too long, or they thin it out too much and it collapses,
Mm,
uh, because it's just it's common template. We learned it in school. These are easy. They've been doing it for years. And I found the same thing happened at Hewlett Packard. Is the turnover of engineers on programs was a bit faster than with railroad bridges in the 1800s, and it was about a 5-year cycle. So a brand new technology hits the circuit board world, and the lead designers, the most senior folks, are in charge of implementing that particular technology. And
okay.
they have a reputation to preserve, and they have a lot of context and history and what things to look for. And not even consciously, they probably wouldn't tell you what they're looking for, but they could spot and see things that, based on their experience. And then the design would get normalized. We put it on a lot of other products. The mid-level engineers run those shows. They were taught by the senior engineer, and then by 5 years later, it was the college hire with no context, with no oversight, wherever else. Oh, it's an easy thing. Just put this on this board, and they violate one of the fundamental assumptions or one of the fundamental principles of it, and then it fails. And when I was tracking all these different designs across industries or across our divisions, it was about a 5-year cycle that a technology would be introduced until we'd screw it up.
Hmm.
And it was Petrosky's book that gave me the idea to look for it that way, is the changing of the guard. When something becomes easy, or common, doesn't make it easy. I think was the way I was trying to educate folks about it. Is we tell them to read the old reports and everything else. And they're like, well, you send them to the library and there's 8,000 documents there. That's not really helpful. And so it's, and I think this wrinkle of being able to focus on long form reading just complicates it even more. I think it's going to be a problem going forward, I think.
And, "Hey, I just want an answer," go
Hmm.
let me just search it up or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, Templates can be a crutch for that too.
Yep.
I'm not gonna read this whole big document. I'm just gonna start filling out the template. And then if I don't understand something, I'll go back to the document to figure it out.
Yeah. Or the help
Because
desk.
it happens to me too. Like I'll start reading through a document. I'm like, what are they getting at? I don't get it. But let me start with the template. Let me just go through an example instead.
Hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes the procedures can't stand on their own without the template, but then you use the template and you miss things. But yeah, sort of the same thing. You're just trying to get it done without understanding
Yeah.
the
which
context
is which is the
of it.
problem. We do need to. I think Chris Jackson talks about it. Is you really can't afford as a professional to check your brain at the door. You need to use your brain to think through stuff. And reading and writing is a wonderful tool to help you think through stuff or to learn things and so on. Um, Sit down and read the book, read the manual. As much as I hate to do that as an engineer, it should be simple. There's all kinds of ways to go for that, but I'm just thinking if you're listening to this, one, thanks for listening. Now go read the. Well, I'm not going to recommend reading the transcript because all our ums and ohs and all the other stuff we do in there. It's reading is not to be avoided. It's, I think, embracing it, and it's a great vehicle for learning, to learn context, to learn background. The writing of the long form thing is really has to be written for your audience. If they're looking for a one page, do the exact summary, but have the backup, have the details, so that 5 years from now, that team, I like your story, Dianna. They said, "Oh, we found your report and it was great. We built on that. It would save us tons of time and stuff like that." It's those kinds of things still happen, yet it's not an excuse to not write it down, not write the long form stuff.
Yeah. And like you said, once you start writing stuff, not just the reading, but if you're writing it out, it helps organize your own thoughts for your own learning and finding
Hmm.
gaps of where you may need to go find something or make new connections between what it is that you've been looking at.
Yep.
It can be a useful tool, a useful engineering tool for you to think through a problem.
I think one last point here, Diana, is I'm thinking of the Petrosky set of books. And he talks about the designs and how people create cool stuff and inventions and all this other stuff. And it's one of the things I find in reading that kind of stuff, even autobiographies of Ben Franklin, for example. I read that I don't know how many times over the years. It brings a different way to look at problem solving. It brings you
Yeah,
different
it
ideas
does.
and experiences that you didn't have yourself, yet you can, say, "Oh, I read about that. Let me, you know, maybe that applies here." So it's not in and of itself just read a novel for its enjoyment. It's also the widespread reading of news and current events and technical, like how there was a book out about the 777, about how the design process went. And I thought, well, it was fascinating reading. There was a different way for that company to go about doing what they're doing. And if you can pick up one or two things from that and go, we could do something like that here, that it pays for the time you read, and it also makes you a bit smarter, I think, overall, more rounded, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and
Uh,
there are a lot of books related to engineering and design and reliability that are available to read,
yeah,
and they have new ideas, different concepts. They're worth checking out. There's something out there for you that you would like.
yeah. And if you're at a loss for anything, go to Diana's Quality During Design podcast and look for the book review episodes. They'll certainly get you interested in reading the books that you guys highlighted.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
hoping to do another one this year on AI 2041.
oh, okay.
So if you want to read that one,
I don't know. I probably should because I don't know much about AI. We played with it a couple of times, but yeah, I should. Not that I will, but I should. But I should take a look at it. But anyway, if you got a book recommendation for us, something you read that was really cool and helped you out in different ways, let us know. Or if you've not read a book in 10 years, you don't have to let us know, but please pick up a book. That'd be good for you and the teams that you work with. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. There's a couple of ways to get in touch with us. Dianna and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. And best wishes, Dianna, and looking for your next book to take on.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you, Dianna. Take care. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.